Good evening and happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a holy and edifying weekend. And I'm continuing to reflect on the trip that I took to Italy. And tonight we're going to talk especially about the first time I've ever been in Florence. We had not very much time in Florence, just enough time to see a few of the highlights. And while the city is interesting to me, and uh, kind of the hub of a lot of Renaissance culture. One of the things that you certainly have to do when you're in Florence is to go to the art museum there and to see the original sculpture of Michelangelo's David. And so that's something that we did is that we all lined up at the art museum. We had tickets, timed tickets, and I went to go see Michelangelo's David, and it's certainly technically very well executed. I couldn't do that with a block of marble, and it's not all that difficult to conclude that there are a few who can. So I'm not surprised that people would pay attention to it, but something that I've noticed about myself in art museums, which I find myself in occasionally, is that I always find the medieval art to grab me more. I always find, kind of the pre-Renaissance paintings, especially from the High Middle Ages and the 12th and 13th centuries, to be the place where I'm most captivated by the images. And by the time I get to the Renaissance, I find my attention beginning to wander. It doesn't grab me as much. And, maybe you'd want to say that this is some subject matter thing. You get to the 16th century and all of a sudden you see a lot more Dutch painting fruits and like kitchen utensils and that sort of thing. And you're a priest and you obviously just like religious topics more. And I don't think that that's entirely, incorrect, that I prefer art with religious characters, religious themes. I really do really like all of that. Um, but there's something else going on there, and I just want to compare a few, just two different images, and let's see if we could do a little bit of compare and contrast. Perhaps at some point during a difficult, trying moment during these live streams, you've seen me look up. And when I'm looking up like this, I'm looking at an image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help here. This is pretty close to exactly what I have just above my monitor, this image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And you can notice certain things about this image. First off, realism isn't the number one concern here. So here we see Our Lady holding the infant Jesus here. And the infant Jesus looks just like a shrunken down adult, especially with the proportion of the head. If you have an opportunity to observe a baby in real life, you'll know that babies' heads are very proportionally big in comparison with the rest of their body, and that proportionality is not kept here. Um, the symbolism behind this painting, maybe you can just read it yourself. You can just look at it. Is we have these angels showing Jesus the crucifixion. So you've got the cross that he's going to be crucified on the right, and then on the left you've got the lance that will pierce his side, and the reed with the wine laced with myrrh, or like vinegar laced with myrrh, um, that the Roman soldiers were offer him, and you can see him turning himself in to his mother. He's frightened by this image, and the Lord, Our Lady, holding on to his hands and holding him close to him while looking out at the viewer there, inviting us to contemplate this image. This is a very symbolic in stylized image. And you can see some of the Greek text in there. This is part of a common East-West heritage there. The Redemptorist order actually has Our Lady of Perpetual Help as their preferred Marian devotion there, and they I have one in every one of their churches and that sort of thing. And so it's a common East-West heritage thing. This isn't an uncommon, even though it's much more in a Byzantine style. It's not unusual to see this in parts of the West. So it's nice that we've got this in common, because I think it's a lovely depiction. I found this one, a nice framed copy of it, and I've put it up in every room that I've been in since I was in seminary. And it's a very comforting image for me to contemplate. This kind of represents that older art style here, that older art style that was supplanted by the painters and the innovators of the Renaissance in Florence. And so we'll move on to probably a famous painting that you see here. And this painting for me, and remember, I'm just a stupid priest in the middle of the country here. I feels kind of like we're in between things right here. You can see there's a much greater emphasis on realism here. Raphael, the School of Athens, he's playing around with perspective here. You've got that perfectly lined up perspective, the vanishing point, everything being modeled realistically, approximating what we would see if we were standing in a particular portion of a particular piece of architecture that was well built. And all of these bodies, we've got Plato here and Aristotle here. And if I were better educated, I could tell you exactly who all of these great Greek thinkers were. There's a great emphasis on having realistic bodies, realistic bodily proportions there. Now, I don't write Renaissance art off entirely, because I think they were at this inflection point between the old world, where things were very symbolic, and the new way of doing things that they kind of pioneered, where things were a little bit more realistic and literal. They were still handling that toolkit well. So you could see, who are we putting in the middle? Who's going farther off to the sides? What sort of gestures are they making there? But it ultimately seems to fall a little bit away from this symbolic vision there. And I think in the wrong hands, this realism doesn't do anybody any good there. So the basic summary of this perhaps unfocused rant is that Father Eric is not the biggest fan of the Renaissance. There's certainly things that I could appreciate there, but the farther and farther away we get from the highly symbolic representations, the less and less I'm interested in them. And the more I wish we could have things that are a little bit older and have proven to last. So that's what I've got. And we also, we have the link here. And anybody who would like to participate in this live stream is free to do so long as they keep themselves to a certain basic level of decorum. We'd be happy to have you on. And you could tell me that I'm wrong about a Renaissance art, and maybe we can come up with good counter examples of the things that I'm talking about. But the focus on realism doesn't impress me. I guess that is a short way to summarize what I'm saying. And surprise, surprise, Mark's joining us tonight. Hello, Mark.
Hello. You wanted somebody to tell you were wrong. So I can't, because Renaissance art is crap.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, roughly, like you took a lot of convincing there.
Well, that was when they started signing their pieces, and that's like the end of the world right there. That's that's the end of the world. Yeah. It's it's actually, I think it's tied up with the sort of problems that we're running into. I've been reading Chesterton.
Hmm.
So he wrote a book about his trip to America, and
I've read that one. It's fun to read. I really love his image of
wow.
the savage who doesn't know how to read down on Broadway. He can't read all of these different glowing neon signs in New York City, and he just thinks that this is the most wonderful city he's ever been in when it says "Buy Krelm toothpaste." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. That's exactly the section that I haven't finished the book yet, but that's exactly the section that got me. I was like, well, there it is. Like that's the whole outline, right? I mean, you need the setup in the beginning, and it's a great work. It really is. But it's like, oh well, this kind of explains it. But that was kind of sign of, well, I don't want to say a final piece because I keep getting more pieces, but that was like another like slide in, and I'm like, no, 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 this is exactly, we'll say, better than my point of, what part of what happens is to create marketing is you take messaging out of the church, right? The church is no longer the place where all the proclamations are made and all the things are told to all the people. Right now, you have a quote neutral space, this secular space, right? This objective material reality space, and into that springs marketing. It's like, well, yeah, that's right. But I think Chesterton nails it with the, because he's talking about the, like, the pure impact of, hey, if you didn't understand the symbols, you wouldn't realize it wasn't the crowning of a new emperor, except when you came back the next night and said, wait a minute, we did this last night. There can't possibly be this many emperors being crowned. Right. And I'm just like, yeah, that's actually a really good point. And it's interesting too, because he starts the whole thing off with this form, which asks the simple questions, right? The simple questions everybody wants the answers to, like, are you an anarchist? Realizing, some people would realize immediately, I'm not going to answer that honestly if I am, right? Although that's not true.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I don't know if he'll ever get to the point where he realizes the significance of answering that falsely, right? Because it gives you a moral justification in the age of gnosis. You can't say you didn't know that you were lying when you did an anarchist act on our soil, right? And so that gives you this righteous way to punish, which, I'm going to have to think about that for like many, many years, probably,
Mhm.
right? Because it's an age of gnosis issue. It's like, is the crime in the crime, or is the crime in the fraud, right?
The
Or
mens rea, we might say, if we were using proper legal
there we
terms
go.
there.
Or
Yeah.
or is it an additional crime because you kind of indicated that you weren't the kind of person that would do that, and then you did it anyway, right? And we have
Mm.
your signature, and right, like, oh, these are fascinating. We'll call them extra. Sorry, Father. Extra legal questions, because that's I'm more interested in justice than I am in law, because those two aren't the same thing. But then
Sadly
I like
not.
I like his contrast. He's like, we do the same thing in England. We just don't have to ask that question. We have to ask a different question. Where are you from? And then we know whether or not you're an anarchist. Like, oh yeah, you're from there. You're an anarchist. We're not letting you in, right?
Mhm,
And then he points out, it's not like we don't have anarchists. We do, but they're safe anarchists because they're English. So we just call them eccentric, and they're holding. In other words, they're holding competing ideas. They're holding English values, but they would still, where is, where is this line? I'm an anarchist. It's more like it's a posturing more than anything else, right?
mhm, mhm.
Which is interesting. Interesting. So I can't wait to finish it. It's just a very dense but small book, but very dense, very dense.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, he's got this great I don't know how far you've gotten into it, but there's a few points of that book that really stick out to me. And one of them is um, him being translated into Americanese by American journalists
Oh, the in New York. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
in
got
New
to the New
York.
York
It's like
interview.
Chesterton
Yeah.
says, prohibition, all about the mighty dollar sign, and it's like, that's not the way Chesterton said it, but it is what he said, you
Yes,
know?
yes, exactly.
So he was like, I was initially a little shocked to hear that I had say that, but I understand that if I were to give a lecture in France, the French newspapers would translate my words into French so that their readers would be able to understand it. And why should not the American newspapers do the same thing?
Right, right. He's just it's interesting too because he's just like he makes all these really good logical consistency arguments for why you shouldn't prejudge America without having been there.
Hmm.
And why he says it's fine if you want to just laugh at America, but then you can't critique them. And it's like, excellent. This is exact. So, because people are always like, how are you so sure, Mark? Well, actually, read Chesterton. He'll tell you how you can be so sure about these things. It's not like I invented the method. Like, it's not that hard. Oh, you're logically inconsistent. Bang, I can see that. You're not to be trusted. Okay, fair enough. Moving right along. And everybody gets pissed off. They're like, you can't be sure about that. I'm like, actually, you can. Actually, it's not hard. It's not hard at all.
Well, speaking of things that shouldn't be difficult
Mm,
here, wondering if you had seen this in
I
the
did.
chat there. There's definitely, I think, a mood that would connect these two. And it's that mood that we're kind of getting at the end of now, where it's like we're making progress. Like there's this real sense of being on the tail of something and unraveling it as time goes on. I think that runs pretty well between the Renaissance and the Enlightenment.
But isn't the
But it seems to be
Enlightenment
running out of
at the
steam
end?
now because you get to the bottom of materialism and it's like, well, turns out there's nothing there because
But
materialism's
isn't
something
the
you get to the
Enlightenment
bottom
at
of.
the end of the Renaissance? Like, isn't that the one of the transition points people point to? Like, by the time you get to the Enlightenment, you're definitely out of the Renaissance sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, time frame wise, it's just the next. It's the thing that comes after the Renaissance. We're calling the Enlightenment, and that it's weird to talk like that because again, the Enlightenment has to be defined by the rediscovery of the ancient Greek texts and ancient Roman texts. It has to
Mhm.
be.
Well, that's
And
the
yet
Renaissance.
well, it happened in the Renaissance,
Hmm.
right? But it's the Enlightenment where we're reinfused with it. Like I think it's because of the printing press, right? Like
Hmm.
now it's because it was always, we'll say, in the halls of the nobles. Yeah, because this is always like, was there a dark ages? It's like, well, there have to have been. Otherwise, saying the Enlightenment doesn't make any sense, or at least the sense you can make out of saying the Enlightenment doesn't function. It doesn't work because if there were no dark ages, what are you contrasting Enlightenment with? What are where what are we talking about, right? And what we're talking about is more the availability of the Western canon to schlucks off the street, uh,
Hmm.
right? Which is like, and again, like Chesterton goes into this very well, at least in the first third of the book, which is Ixnan's fault because I couldn't remember because Rachel Fulton Brown recommended it when I asked about, gee, Western values look suspiciously U.S. only, and she was like, yes, Chesterton talks about that in this, and I couldn't remember, and I mentioned it on my live stream, and Nixon and I went, it's this one, and I'm like, oh, thanks. And I got a copy from Gutenberg, right, the online Gutenberg archive project. So Project Gutenberg is pretty cool. So yeah, I've been plowing my way through that, but like, yeah, he got there first for sure. Like, I don't. That's what puzzles me about it. Everyone's like, wow, and I'm like, none of this is even. It's not even old. It's at this point, it's really old. Like Chesterton was writing about all this back in the day. His perspective on America, though, whoa, that's a great contrast because he's so far back too, right? So it's you're also going back in time.
Right, we're talking he went over to America in like 1912 or 1922. I can't remember. It's in that time frame though, right?
Right. It's
Around
way
the war
back.
somewhere. Yeah.
It's definitely before the second act of the Great War, which is really important because that's the contrast you need.
Well,
You
certainly
really
because
need.
Chesterton died in 1936, so it'd be hard for
Right.
him to have
Yeah.
written that during the second act.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, about 100 years ago is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is 3+ generations.
hmm
It's super important, right? It's super important to see that level of contrast. You really do need to go back before the First World War, but just getting that much, then you sort of see, oh, there's just war. There's this big materialist war because materialism is materialisming. It's like whatever. What did you expect? Right? It's a bit like the people who go, oh well, they were saying words are violence. That's silly. And then they're shooting people talking. And I'm like, what did you think they were gonna do? They kind of told you. Like, I don't if this is a surprise to you, then I got news. You're not gonna make it. You
Yeah,
can't get a more clear signal.
I think there's a difference between a surprise and a shock.
Maybe, but I think a lot of people were completely caught off guard.
Yeah.
And now they're like, "Oh my." And I'm like, "If you didn't see this coming, my goodness. Did you know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west?"
Yeah.
This was really obvious.
I imagine you're making a veiled allusion to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, well, and shootings at President Trump at his
hmm
rally speeches, right? Like
Yeah.
well, why would you shoot like look, like just logic it out. It's way easier to kill Trump when he's not at a rally speech. Way easier. So if the goal is to kill Trump, that's different. If the goal is to stop the violence, it has to be done at a public speech because you've pretty much said that's what's bothering you. Okay, fair enough. Also, evil, but
And that seems like it would
it's
be
logical.
a very age of gnosis thing to equate knowledge and violence, or
Yeah,
speech and violence. I mean, because it's like, oh boy,
highest
knowledge
value.
is power, and
Yep,
and look at all this power he's wielding. He's machine gunning people's intellects. We have to do something about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's why the age of gnosis is such a helpful frame because it actually just does explain all this stuff quite plainly, quite quickly, and quite easily. You don't have to think about it, and then you can see all the things that are going to happen. Can't do anything about them, but necessarily. But I mean, you can move the needle locally as much as you can, and that's great. But yeah, it's good framing is fantastically important. But
Mhm.
once you have it, like, yeah, okay, yeah, I see. Speech is violence. Yeah, of course, someone's going to get shot for speaking. Yeah, pretty much.
What are you talking about?
We're
All
talking
kinds.
about shooting you for your violent speech.
Oh no. That doesn't really sound like it's in line with Catholic social teaching.
It's not. I've become an anarchist. I wrote
Oh
so on a government
no.
form.
Oh no.
Excellent
Baroque
tie-in, brother.
priest.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm gonna
So,
shoot you if you don't say 10 Hail Marys on the rosary or something.
There we go. There. Oh, he's gonna go. He's gonna do it.
don't shoot. Don't shoot.
I
I got my rosary right here. It was
I
blessed
know,
by
right?
Papa Leo.
But you see that does that whole sequence of words of violence. It goes right back to Chesterton's observation about the forms in America. Right back to it. Right? It's like, yeah, I mean, just be plain about your intent. We're not going to believe what you fill out in the form anyway, apparently. So, why not?
Yeah. Is there anything else great from that book? He talked about how England has weather and America doesn't. Because the weather changes so frequently in England, it's just
Yeah.
a little more exciting. Whereas it's like, yep, either in America you get desert hot or frigid cold. The extremes aren't romantic enough for him, which, he may as well just be parochial with his own homeland. Like that's fine. I'm at peace
Well,
with
but the weather there, like if you actually look at the numbers, the weather there doesn't change much between summer and winter.
it.
And then, but during the day, it changes like mad. It's completely insane. Like I think I mentioned this before. Like I should have left Ireland at least a day earlier, because by that last day, I was like, I am tired of this freaking weather. Where like 1 minute I have my hood down and everything's fine, and the next minute it's raining and it might still be sunny and it's just pissing me off. Like I'm not used to this, and I put up with it in Scotland for 2 whole weeks, and it just wasn't as bothersome as it was in Ireland. In Ireland, I was like, I'm sick of it. I'm done. Get me out of here. It's call an early plane or something. Let's go.
Call an early plane. Yes, that's how it works. Yeah, if you spend enough money, somebody will get you over the Atlantic.
You can
Someday,
Uber a
someday.
plane. Uber Air. Uber Air.
Well, they have that. I have advertisements for private jet flights all the time on my phone for some reason. I'm like, did you
What
not
mailing
understand?
list did you get on?
I feel like they'll have that in like 20 years. They'll probably
No,
have.
they have
like,
it now.
Uber. Yeah, but it'll
No, they-
probably be more common. Like they'll be.
They
like,
have it.
"Oh,
They have it right now. Like I could order one on my phone. It told me so the other day. It's been
Pay
doing that for about 2 months.
Pay me $400 and I'll Uber you over to from Kansas to Rome or something. I don't know.
It's a
Oh,
little
that's
more
going to be a
money
little
than
more
that.
than $200 there. I saw a video about how jet engines work today.
Ooh, yeah, those
That's
are fun.
amazing. And
Yeah.
they shouldn't. And you were right, Mark. You had mentioned this on a live stream months ago that they were building jet engines before they really understood how they worked.
Yeah, no
And
idea.
specifically, it's like, well, when we use a nickel alloy for the engine blades, they are much more resistant to heat and wear and tear. And we don't know why. And it has to do with the crystalline structure, which they couldn't study until the scanning electron microscopes got good enough, you know. It's just utterly fascinating. And it's basically magic what they're doing at Rolls-Royce. It's basically just magic.
They
Here we are.
didn't even have the good theories about how the compressed air thing worked in a jet. First of all, look at a jet engine and you tell me where there's compressed air. Because it's not obvious. It doesn't compress air the way you expect. And you look at the blades and you're like, that's part of a compressor? How does that work? It does just none of it matches what you
and
might
then the back
expect.
part of the turbines spins the front part. Like that's not how these things work.
Yeah. No, the whole thing is wacky. Actually, if you want to see cool jet engine stuff, the YouTube channel Technology Connections, they're a little old, but he's got a bunch of jet engine stuff. Like they've got mini jet engines and they put them on. They do strain measurements. Those guys are nuts. They're completely. I just look at them and I'm like, you guys all need to be in an insane asylum. This is crazy. And then I'm like, if I had the tools, I would be doing all of this and more. So much fun. But they do like hardcore scientific measurements, and they do all kinds of strange. Like one time they made a dielectric grease for heat transference, the sort of thing you put on your CPU. That's better than anything else. Like actually,
Then 2 years later, Thermal Grizzly started selling it.
They had it for sale for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like phenomenally good. It's like 30% better than the top thermal grease you can buy. And they give
It's
you
not
the
like
recipe
a
to make it at
liquid
home.
metal or a phase change pad, is it?
No. They made dielectric grease. They just
Okay.
made better dielectric grease, and they give you the damn formula, or you can buy it from them. And theirs is a bit more precise because the measurement, like the level of measurement this guy does, is it's not normal. It's not normal to pay that much attention to those types of numbers. And I know because I have the same affliction, so I'm familiar with this problem. There's a bunch of hobbies I won't take up. Like no, I can't do that. I would consume my life because I would just be like, oh, it's got to be completely, every atom must be exactly aligned. Yeah. And I buy all the equipment to do it too. No, can't do it. Can't do it.
Have you ever heard of Factorio? That'd be a fun game for you to play.
It doesn't sound like a familiar term to me, but I don't.
You build a factory.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
No.
I haven't played it myself, but it's one of those ones where you look at somebody's Steam library and you see 5,000 hours played, and it's like, yep, there goes another one.
Yeah, no, I wasted plenty of time in the. Was it actually just World of Warcraft back then when it was before it was multiplayer? And they, the little orcs go work, and you put them to work, and
Warcraft 3 is probably what you're looking for.
Warcraft 3. Yeah. That's what was in my head, but I wasn't sure that was the right thing. But yeah, I wasted tons of time on that game.
But you turned out all right,
Not good. Work.
Oh man. Yeah. So jet engines, they work because I got across the Atlantic a couple weeks ago. That's how you know.
They built the better plane technology or better plane technology story. So they learned nothing from the Titanic. So what they did was the early planes had square windows, and of course that's a no-no for anybody who
because you get failure points in there, right?
Yeah. Corners are failure points. 90-degree angles are evil. That's actually one of the things that might have contributed to the Titanic sinking at all. Because interestingly, that was fixed on the Olympia, the sister ship that was built just a little bit later. So they fixed it in the drawing. There's a whole fascinating story about that. But anyway, so they made the mistake with planes like morons. And then it was the Douglas company, which is now McDonnell Douglas, but back then was just Douglas. And one of their planes crashes. They had a couple of other incidents. So they go out to the crash scene and they basically invent modern crash scene investigation, where they have the engineers out and the engineers are like, collect every single piece, no matter how small. And then they go in and put it all back together. And they go, it's the corners on the windows, use round windows. And then obviously now that's the model we use worldwide for figuring out what happened when aircraft blow up. So it's like, yeah, that all came from the Douglas company.
It all came from a bunch of guys standing around the field, scratching their heads and saying, now what?
A bunch of overpaid engineers who were highly valued and were given carte blanche to fix a problem because they didn't want. But like back then too, like planes flew a lot slower and they took longer to crash. So people walked away from crashes pretty often. Gene Roddenberry was in 3 plane crashes. 3.
And yet somehow
he
was still believe. Oh, he was a pilot. Okay, but he still believed in the future then.
Yeah, no, he was a pilot too. Yeah, I think he was flying 2 of those aircraft, but I might be mistaken. I don't remember all the stories anymore.
That's wild.
It is wild. It is pretty wild. But the planes flew much slower back then. So they also used a lot more fuel, unfortunately. Then they got jet engines, and then everything changed. But that's all German technology. To break it to you.
Why would I be upset about that? That's why we beat the Germans in World War II, is so that we could steal their stuff.
We beat them despite them having better technology, and no one ever mentions that for some weird reason. And then they go, progress. And I'm like, progress doesn't work. Like, I'm sorry, just flat out. This does not do the thing you claim it does reliably. It reliably doesn't work. Why are we doing this? Also, there's a cost, and that cost is pretty high. Could we not? I don't know. Just the thing. Just me.
Right. Yeah, it's like, I mean, there are certain battles where like the technological advantage swung things wildly in one way. You could imagine. I'm not sure if this was a real battle, but the ending of The Last Samurai, where they got the Gatling gun going at the charging samurai. It's like, well, yeah, automatic machine guns did change the way we fight war. That and precision artillery. That's, you put those 2 together, throw in a little mustard gas, and you got World War One.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But there was a it's like we weren't going from spears to German tanks. We were going from American tanks to German tanks. And it can't close that kind of gap.
Well, interestingly, so the Germans had tanks in the first act, and they were useless. And that's not because they were misdesigned, because we're talking about the Germans here. Like, they did a pretty good job, actually. But yeah, it's like these things don't work the way you think. I think what made Germany super successful in war at the end of the day was they were all carrying a copy of Nietzsche. That's what I think it was. Like, talk about the spirit of evil. Like, nobody ever talks it. Like, Peterson talks like Nietzsche foretold of this thing as a prophecy, and I'm like, or did he cause it? Because I got questions about all the copies of Thus Spake Zarathustra that were found in the foxholes in World War I and World War II. That's a little weird. I hate to say it, but like, it's kind of strange, bro. Like, what are we talking about here? What's happening? Is that a spirit? Maybe?
Yeah, and it ultimately didn't conquer, right? The way it said it would.
That's right. That's right.
What do we make of that, Because the
Yeah.
American soldiers, for the most part, had Bibles stuck into their,
what
little
they
New
had in their
Testaments with the
foxhole.
Psalms and Proverbs,
And how many of those stopped bullets or shrapnel or whatever? A hell of a lot, from my understanding.
Yeah.
So, just saying, something's going on. I don't know what, but something's happening.
Who could possibly explain these things? It's too mysterious for any of us.
Excellent. That keeps me happy. Mystery keeps me happy. I'll take the miracles, Father. I'll take them all. Thank you very much.
Oh man. Another potential topic that I could have ranted about at the beginning of the stream tonight. So one of the guys at the gym works for the TSA. I think he's one of the more valuable members of the TSA because his job is to build training devices for the people operating the scanners. So he literally gets $1,000 and he has to go build a bomb, not one that has any explosive charge in it, but the like when it goes through the scanner, they should be able to see, oh, that's not a PS5, that's a bomb there. And he was out of work for the past month, and he was kind of frustrated at the people in Congress. And heck, I don't blame him, right? Because he still hasn't gotten his paychecks yet. They said they would be coming in on Thursday, and it's Monday. It's kind of a long time to be carrying a credit card balance, And so, just as a friend of mine, I feel bad for him that he had to deal with showing up to work and not getting paid and all of that. But I've said this for years now. We get the politicians we deserve. Like that's kind of where I'm at right now. And so here we are.
Yeah.
Last days of the Roman Republic.
Nobody knows what to make of it. Right. And then all you see is all the people online.
It's really simple, Mark. Like this isn't actually that complicated, right? Go to mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, and don't skip leg day. You do all of those things, you will become a better person. And then if enough people do those things, we'll get better politicians and governance.
That is also true. But you don't understand any of these things when you put it in this binary. And then you have all these leftists saying, oh, well, I'm not part of the left. I must be a conservative. And I'm like, conservatives don't do what you do. Sorry. Conservatives are not going to go online and try to tell you why you're wrong or logic you out of your... Conservatives are not retarded. They know that doesn't work. They're not going to do it. Like, they're not online. If someone's online, the odds they're a conservative are vanishingly small.
What's that?
And then you just look at William F. Buckley and you're like, because he was the last, one of the last true conservatives that ever got on TV. I haven't had any conservatives on TV since Buckley. Maybe one or two. Like, you could probably make an argument for Pat Buchanan or something. But
yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people now that like are going after Buckley on social media because they prefer Pat Buchanan. Like that's like a trend now.
Buchanan's a watered down version of a elitist, puritanical, conservative right winger. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
He's more of an everyman. Well, that's another thing Chesterton talks about. They're like, oh, you're kind of like an everyman, and he's like, I don't think that's an insult. I think you meant it as a compliment, but it doesn't sound good to me.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
it's not, but it is in America. Oh, you're an everyman. That's fantastic. It's like, no, it's terrible.
yeah.
I think there was a really interesting article in First Things. I think it was Louise Perry, but it could have been Mary Harrington or Abigail Favale. And I might just have those three insufficiently distinguished in my mind, right?
There.
It was called The King and the Swarm. And it made this argument that what made democracy possible was a widespread habit of literacy. And literacy meaning more than the ability to read letters into words, and even that, but like a habit of being able to think logically and linearly, because that's how information gets presented to you in a well-written book. Is it's logical and linear. You start at the beginning of the page and you work your way down in a raster pattern to the end of the page there. And with like forms of media that we're engaging in right this very second,
Yeah.
things don't have to be so logical and linear. You can just read Mark's facial expressions, which can occur simultaneously with somebody being wrong, and like process all of that information, kind of holistically,
Yeah.
and like cheaper and more and quickly, right? And like a greater proportion of people can absorb information that way. And so a lot of people won't bother with the habit of literacy, of being able to read and put things into a logical order. And the argument that she made was that democracy was built on literacy, and as literacy goes away, what's going to replace that? And as an educated literary person, she was a little ambivalent about it. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting article, but I don't have anybody to talk about it with. So
it's Mary Harrington. I'll read it.
It's Mary Harrington. Okay.
I'll read it tonight. Yeah, Louise is not. She's a hippie commune chick.
I read this 2 months ago, so I don't feel bad about mixing up all of the women.
Yeah, no, they all write the same. It's fine. Yeah, they're all on the angry, upset, please somebody do something side, which is, that's about what you'd expect.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, though, that they misunderstand the problem. Like, first of all, this isn't an issue of democracy. It's like the ancient Greeks wrote about why democracy doesn't work. We know why it fails.
You can't
democracy
say that.
is not a function of literacy.
You're not allowed to say that.
Well, she was looking an awful lot at like some of the things that were a little bit closer to direct democracy, like a really small hamlet with like maybe 120 people living there, or 120 voting men running the civic life there, which is a little closer to like being a manageable democracy where you could actually build a consensus with your neighbors.
Well, but I mean, I think this is the problem. If you actually engage in local politics, the thing you realize in about 4.5 seconds, and this is right down to, so like I have an electric co-op, and my electric co-op is awesome. My electricity costs way less than everybody else in the state. We co-op people.
AI data centers soon, but go on.
We're all making out, well, the AI data centers won't affect us because we're part of the co-op. We're all making out like bandits as part of the co-op. I think there's 5 or 6 co-ops in South Carolina. And they have voting, and they want you to vote in their little election scheme thing. And so they entice you with free gifts. So you come out and you fill out the little ballot, and they give you free gifts. And I'm like, free swag? I'm a techie. All you have to say to me is free swag, and I'm there. Conference, boring lectures, doesn't matter. You give me a jacket or something, I'm in. It's it. Techies are really, we're simpletons, right? Yeah. But the issue is, oh, you want me to vote? Well, I'm going to take that very seriously. Oh, there's stuff to read. Okay, let's do this. And then you find out really quickly that all candidates have trade-offs. You never get the perfect candidate. And what we're seeing now is people are going, well, we thought Trump was going to do X, Y, Z, like this legalistic, contractual sort of Trump was going to do all these things and he didn't. So now we have to impeach him. And it's like, what are you, a psychopath? Like, what is
Yeah.
wrong with your brain? That
Like,
was
not
never
keeping, not
people-
keeping a campaign promise is not a high crime or a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Well, and he hasn't broken any of his campaign promises either. It's just that people misconstrued what he was saying.
you could say it is a sin, though. You could say that it's a lie, or it's, you know, it's contrary to justice. I mean, I guess from an ethical standpoint, but
If he
you
did
know.
it, but a lot of the times he didn't.
yeah,
And a lot of the times you have to have room to say, like, I'm going to release the Epstein files. Oh, wait a minute. We just looked at them and we realized we shouldn't do that. Like, you
Yeah.
have to be able to do that because that's
Yeah.
how everything is in your life too. It's just that there's more at stake when it's somebody up at the level of the presidency,
yeah,
right? Like it has to be more at stake. And we're more forgiving of our own sins, we'll call them, than we are of the politicians' sins. And then we swing wildly the other way because everyone's trapped in this weird binary where they think there are conservatives online, which just always cracks me up. I'm like, people have no idea. You don't know.
Well, there are
you wouldn't know what
conservatives
conservative would be.
online. They exist in certain circles,
But how
They're not
online
public.
are they?
huh?
They're not online.
Many
they
of them
use
are very
Facebook Marketplace.
fringe. Many of them are
Right.
very fringe. Like, so a lot of the really crazy, like, controversial conservatives. I'm not going to name names, but the really crazy controversial conservatives are mostly online.
No one online's a conservative. Conservatives are not going to come online and try to convince people through words or typing or
No, I don't think they're
newspapers,
online to convince
anything.
people, but I see a lot of conservative shows online that are strictly online shows where they basically just soapbox. Like, they'll go on, they'll be like, "Oh, can you believe what politician X said today? Can you?" But they're
Conservatives
not really
never do
trying
that.
to
A conservative
evangelize
would never attack
conservatism.
another person in that way ever. They
Mark,
wouldn't.
now might be a useful time for you to define what you mean by conservative, because that definition might help resolve
Yeah.
the verbal disagreement here.
If you're conserving things, you're not trying to knock down other people ever.
I would agree.
They wouldn't do that by definition because they're conservatives. They also wouldn't necessarily redeem that person. They would do things like, I disagree. Like, watch William F. Buckley. Just watch Buckley from back in the day.
the,
when he was on TV.
the reason I brought up the fact that on X you see all these people saying Buckley sucks, I prefer Pat Buchanan, is I think there's this consensus that Pat Buchanan was kind of like this proto-Trump because, like, he
Yeah.
was talking about immigration
He
and
was.
certain nationalistic positions that Trump later adopted. And Trump actually, I think in 2016, Trump actually called Pat Buchanan and apologized for calling him a racist, which, I mean, Trump barely apologizes to anyone. So the fact that he apologized to Pat Buchanan.
Trump apologizes all the time. Everybody just ignores it. Yeah, Pat Buchanan gave Trump the complete outline for how to take over a party. And
Yeah,
Trump realized Pat Buchanan's mistake was that he took over the wrong party. At that time, when Pat Buchanan did it, you could not take over the Republican Party.
right.
You know who else tried that? Teddy Roosevelt. It also didn't work there. Do you know why? Because that's an actual party with a cohesion and a set of virtues and values. And you know what isn't? All of the other parties that have ever existed in this country since it's been a country
Well,
are not that.
I think
period.
right now Trump
They're
has been.
opposition.
Yeah, I think right now Trump has been pretty successful in taking over the Republican Party, but I think that's because he knew when the iron was hot. Like, he knew when to strike. Like, I remember growing up, I remember reading on the internet all the time, like, oh, Trump is going to run for this. He's going to run for governor of New York. He's going to run against Obama in 2012, and he never did it until 2016. I think the reason why was because he was waiting to strike. He was waiting to see when the iron was hot, and you get to 2016.
He's not.
Obama has won 2 terms. Republicans are kind of in disarray. They don't really.
Did
have
he
a
just
clear
kind of
front runner.
sense it? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, he's an intuitive guy. He does not think things through. He does not sit and do planning. That is not happening. I know everybody wants to think that's the way everything happens in the world. That is not what he does. And the interesting thing is he didn't take over the Republican Party. This is why he had such a problem. What he did was he took all the moderate Democrats and he said, come and vote for me. I'm going to run as a Republican. And that broke the Republican Party for sure, because unlike Pat Buchanan, who did not pursue that strategy because you couldn't, because the moderate Democrats were taken up basically by guys like the Clintons, right? Like the Clinton cartel. Like Donald Trump said it on Oprah. It hasn't not been true since. Like he's never changed his political position probably in his entire life. He agrees with Bill Clinton, right? He's friends with Bill Clinton. He voted for Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's wrong on China and trade. It's the same Donald Trump from Oprah. Same guy.
I don't know if it's the same.
Changed.
I mean, he doesn't really support universal health care anymore. His views on abortion aren't as extreme as they were in 2000.
I don't think anybody who saw what the attempt to give universal health care did supports universal health care anymore in the United States.
Right. But I think Trump is
health care is no longer a tax deduction, and it used to be until they passed that law.
Yeah.
People miss that, right? It's like, that's a pretty high cost.
I think what more so it was I think what Bill Clinton did very well was after the 1960s and really throughout the 1970s, the South was really waning from Democrats, but there were still ancestral Democrats there. Like there were people who were like, well, I don't really agree with the Democrats on abortion, and I don't really agree with them on, certain social issues. But you know what? They may be liberal, but you know what? My great-grandfather, was a lifelong Democrat when Democrats were like 90% of the politicians here in Alabama or West Virginia or, name any like Southern kind of state. And that led to a lot of ancestral Democrats that really propped up Democrats in the South, I think, for a long time. And I think that's why Jimmy Carter was able to win once, because he was able to get the South. And I think Bill Clinton was kind of the last hurrah for those people. Like if you look at the map, Bill Clinton won states like Louisiana and Kentucky. Like no Democrat is winning those states in a presidential election today. But I think Al Gore, especially on climate change, was way too liberal. He turned them all off. And then they just never got it back.
There's no way you're going to understand anything in the political system in the United States with two buckets. We don't have two buckets. Almost everybody's a registered independent. They're not registered Democrat and they're not registered Republican. So they, by their own voter registration, are telling you they're not either of those extremes. Right? Yeah. And if you cater to the middle and you stop saying Democrat and Republican and realize, no, the moderates win the elections. No one else does. No one else. It's the moderates. So if you find the moderate position and you hold the moderate position, which, by the way, despite everything else changing, hasn't changed. Ask me how I know. Because Trump is Bill Clinton minus trade in China and immigration, which, is a newer issue.
I think when it came to the ancestral Democrats, I think they always kind of had a conservative hue on social issues. They were kind of like 1980s Baptist Christian fundamentalists, but they were more liberal on things like unions. Like when it came to economics, they were never really fully on board with the Reagan, economic agenda. Which is why they were still willing to support Democrats for a while. Now, I think as the Democratic Party got more liberal with people like Al Gore and John Kerry and Barack Obama, I think as it started to get a little bit more liberal and a little bit more Northeast Democrat and less kind of Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter Democrat, I think as that shift in the party started to happen, I think you started to see Democrats, the kind of not the ancestral Democrats kind of go more to the right. But I think Trump was the one who really, he killed the ancestral Democrat. Like he made the ancestral Democrat go extinct because Trump was someone that was more of a protectionist and he was more pro-union and he wasn't as much of this free market, capitalist pagan god worshiper that Ronald Reagan was. And so they're like, oh, he's a fundamentalist on immigration and these social issues, but he's also, economically, more in line with some of our, unions and whatnot. We really like him. We're going to vote for him now. And I think that was I think that was ultimately what sealed the deal when it came to Trump. I think that was ultimately what allowed him to kind of win that Bill Clinton coalition.
He's Bill Clinton. There's no difference. So, of course, they voted for Bill Clinton before. They're going to vote for him again. Trump is
Well, but I think today, if Bill Clinton, if they abolished term limits and Bill Clinton ran today, I don't think they would vote for Bill Clinton. I don't think you would see.
No, that's because they saw the disastrous results of all the disastrous things he disastrously did and lied about.
Yeah. I also think the country's gotten more partisan. Again, Bill Clinton could win Arkansas in 1992 and 1996 because it was his home state. Bill Clinton couldn't do that today. Today, I mean, at the very best, he's getting 40% out of Arkansas. And that's assuming that's assuming it's a really good day for him, because Arkansas has just become so heavily Republican in the last 10 to 15 years. But also the reason I was bringing up Buckley, or the reason I brought up, people on X trashing Buckley and saying, oh, we need Pat Buchanan, is because there's been more of this divide on the right that I've seen lately over the issue of Israel, where I think the right has kind of classically been pro-Israel. Even Trump is pro-Israel. But Pat Buchanan was not pro-Israel. And I think you're starting to see more people on the right kind of take this more skeptical view of Israel.
Well, I think the moderates who are betrayed by the leftists who moved further left are skeptical about everything, but we're living in the age of skepticism. Everybody's skeptical about everything. They don't trust authorities. They're finding out as bubbles break, because we're in the middle of chaos, they're finding out things that they thought were true were not true.
Yeah.
That isn't how things were working at all ever, right? In the UK, right? The UK is actually a better way to see what's going on. So the UK is like, we've had a grooming gang problem for 30 years. What happened?
Right.
And it's so bad that the corrupt police are helping out the grooming gangs because they get something out of it too. What happened to England?
Right.
It happened 30 years ago, guys. You were a little late to the party. And they know that now. Their articles are about, this has been going on for 30 years unlooked at. No one's been paying attention to it. It's well, yeah. And so in the US, the similar thing's happening. People are going, this Nick Fuentes guy. And I'm like, Nick Fuentes has been around a long time. If you're coming to Nick Fuentes
he's terrible.
now, you're so late to the party that anything you have to say on this topic, you're going to sound like an idiot. You know why? Because you're 10 years too late. That means you're an idiot. You cannot understand the rise of Nick Fuentes from where he is now. It's not going to work. You're never going to understand it that way.
Well, how should we understand it? Because I don't know what to make of it.
Well,
look, you have to understand it in the realm of skepticism. So you can only remain skeptical for so long, right? You have to agree with somebody about something eventually. And so you're going to go with the person telling you the most true things that match your experience or observation. So as trust in institutions fails, guys, if you read enough psychology white papers, and psychology is terrible, this is all in there from the 70s and 80s. This isn't new information. It's confirmed more recently, right? Trust in institution goes down, right? Trust in individual people goes up. Trust shifts from we're going to believe the authority to we're going to believe our experience and our observation, right? And those two are always slightly at odds. Well, if this one collapses, the one above, all you're going to do is this one. So now what happens is, instead of one authority, you're going to get many authorities, and the authority telling you the thing that matches your observation and what's happened to you is going to get the most attention from you.
And so
Now-
let me see if I can finish it, right? You've got this guy who's saying all of these elite media sources are lying to you. They don't have your best interests at heart. They're being controlled by some shadowy presence. And then COVID happens. You're told that if you just stay at home for 2 weeks, then everything will be just fine.
Yeah.
And that's not how it goes at all. And you're like, well, looks like the guy who was telling me not to trust the institutions was correct.
Yeah.
Also, when that happens, they tell you explicitly to cut off all your ties with everybody else. That's what social distancing, the great evil phrase, and it is nothing but evil. That's what that says. And so when that happens, the thing is, if you do that, you also won't listen to authority eventually, at least some number of people. But now you need to listen to somebody who is telling you things that you are experiencing. And, I almost made this challenge on X earlier today, in fact, because somebody was like, well, tell me what he says that's correct. And I was like, why don't you give me a claim that he makes that you think is wrong, and I'll show you that it's not. How's that for scary? Because what Fuentes is saying, you may not like it, but you're going to be very hard pressed to disprove what he's saying. That is the problem. So if you don't deal with that problem, guess who you're going to make stronger? The guy telling you about the things that you're experiencing and observing and being correct. He's always going to win in an environment where trust in institutions has failed. It's always going to happen. I'm sorry. I don't know how you think the world works, but you only have two options, and you just did away with one of them. So this isn't that hard.
I think when people are really, really pushed to the edge, they feel they have to go in the most extreme opposite direction.
It's not extreme and opposite.
Well, I think when you go on X and you see people saying extreme things like, oh, Hitler was actually a good guy and all this crazy, awful stuff. I think the reason
those guys have no following.
I see a lot of those posts and I see a lot of those people do get a lot of following, but I think the reason they do is because they've been pushed so far to the edge. It's like when you're told for like 10 years, oh, you're racist, you're evil, you're this, you're that, and you're like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. You need to be ashamed of yourself. Eventually, the person just snaps and says, you know what? Maybe I am. Maybe I am the evil bad guy.
But that's the Fuentes crew.
Right. That's exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think that's the Fuentes group.
But they're not extremists. That's the problem. They're not extremists. They're making observations about things that are happening to them. And
I think their views on Hitler are extreme.
I don't know that they are. People keep telling me that, and I'm like, can you give me a quote? And I can't. And I'm like, well, I'm getting suspicious now. Because he
goes around saying Team Hitler. That's pretty extreme.
I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily extreme, given the fact that they were told to socially distance. Socially distancing is pretty extreme. Locking people in their houses, pretty extreme. Those things are extreme. The extremeness already happened. Like Fuentes didn't do that to anybody.
What I'm saying,
things are coming.
What I'm saying is that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that I think when people are pushed just to the edge, they feel like they have to go to the complete opposite direction, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the Fuentes people that are running around saying Hitler was great, Joseph Stalin was great, all these different people, I think they're acting like that because they believe, for 15 years, I was called a racist. And for 15 years, I had this trans stuff shoved down my throats and this gay stuff shoved down my throats. And so they wanted me to be the bad guy. So now I am going to be the bad guy. And
I don't believe in
mentality.
Binaries. Like the world is not that simple.
Also, I think you kind of see the opposite of that in New York City right now too with Mamdani. I think the reason people were like, oh, we're going to vote for a socialist is because New York City just got so unaffordable. It used to be in 1992, you could buy an apartment in Manhattan. You could rent an apartment monthly for like $200. and now you basically have to be a millionaire to live in Manhattan.
They didn't.
And I
They
think that's
didn't vote.
driven
They're
so
not
many people to
voting
the
for a
edge
socialist. They're
that they
not
have
voting
to
for a
vote for a
socialist.
socialist.
No, they're not voting for a socialist. They're voting
that
for
is
a guy
true.
who's telling them the truth. If he happens to be a socialist, we don't care. We want the truth. Right? When
Well,
you
they're
start
voting- they're
looking at
voting
the
for a guy
world
who
that
says
way,
free
instead of
buses.
presuming how they see it, it all starts to make sense, right?
So
The
so
fact-
it's a matter of, I mean, you've talked about this before, Mark, of how somebody becomes an authority, even if they don't necessarily deserve it, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're able to speak to you in a particular way there, and not everybody who's capable of calling out the problems in the world is actually capable of solving them. It's
Right.
certainly a useful first step to look at the rent in New York City and say that it's too damn high. But it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about that? And it's like, well, I mean, how much can you do about it? A
Right.
city at the scale of New York is just going to need to have more services provided, right? Because a city at that scale has huge dependencies on technology that needs constant maintenance, because that's the only way you can pack that many people in, as far as I can tell. Right now. Maybe
No, that's
maybe
right.
there'd be some pre-modern way of doing these things, but it would involve a lot of cholera, and maybe we could go without the cholera, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this unpleasant dynamic pulling out where people are like pretty good at naming some of the problems, and then like, what do they do when they name the problems? Are they
Right.
presenting you, because all of the solutions that are actually going to work are work. You have to go to mass, you have to go to confession, you have to pray the rosary, and you have to do squats. That's all a lot
Right.
of work there. And so, people don't want to hear that. And so this is part of the whole bit I've got, and we're getting the politicians that we deserve, is that, if people were really putting the work in and people really wanted like solution, and like were really building themselves up virtuously and like wrestling with these things, then these people wouldn't be able to run on a platform of promising everybody a puppy and a piece of candy.
That's right.
That's just not how the world works. And so
that's right. But that's what Mandani's doing. And so the fact that he's a socialist is a side effect. It's not like they're like, he's a socialist, I'm going to vote for him. No, it's like, he's telling me the truth and everybody else is lying to me. Who am I going to vote for? That's what it is. I don't care what party affiliation he is or what his ideas are, actually. I care that he's telling me the truth and everyone else isn't. Of course, that's who you're going to vote for. That's actually who you kind of should vote for. That's not even wrong. Now, it just has bad side effects in a world where you don't have a hierarchy and you can't like get rid of all the nutters. So I think that, maybe in my Chesterton reading here about what I saw in America, he's going to delve into that, although he hasn't. But he's sort of alluded to it. Like, sure, the eccentric anarchist friend of his, who's still English, is never going to be allowed to run for a local office because he's an eccentric. No one's going to vote. They're not going to let him on the ballot, right? In America, we don't have such restrictions. And maybe that's part of the problem, which, I might argue, right? And so when you have that breakdown in that situation, and you've got a bunch of guys who have been lying to you all along, still lying to you, and not talking to you about the issues that you feel and you observe, you're going to get into trouble because somebody with very bad ideas is going to say, I'm just going to talk to the people. And then I'm going to murder them all, but I'm going to talk to them first and they're going to like it, right? I mean, that was the history in not too long ago. The Hitler and Stalins, that's what they did. And like, it's not that hard. We've seen this pattern before. Did they happen to be bad people? They were also bad people. Were they telling the truth? They were also telling the truth.
Good evening, gentlemen. A long time no hear, no see.
We can't see you right now.
My attire is not. It's
not
too impressive.
Okay.
No, it's over the standard. But anyway, uh, interesting. I'm a student of American politics. Just listening, I was fascinated by various contributions. Just on the current or contemporary, my observation from down under, the land which does not exist, is as follows. The phenomenon of Mr. Young Fuentes, Nicky, the boy from Chicago, is fascinating, I think. It has broken the Overton window. It has broken the forbidden topics and issues which general mainstream America was not allowed to mention, let alone to emphasize or discuss. And I tend to agree with Easton Thomas. The Just looking at the geography and the statistics in terms of white America. Now, white America, I don't mean to be a sexist, racist, misogynist, all those Nazi fascist things. Please don't. At the end of 1945 was 92%, as I recall. Now it's exponentially fallen down to 59%. And again, it's not whites are better as opposed to other ethnic people, races, cultures, etc., etc. No, I'm not alluding to that whatsoever. But I think the problem, as I see it, is information has been controlled basically by certain elites, and those, whether it's Republican or Democrat, they're part of the club. It's like a family. Each family has its own quarrels, disagreements, and you and I, as I think mentioned earlier, ain't in that club, nor will we ever be in that club. That's my take on general politics, not only in America, it's applicable to white, Christian, or post-Christian Europe, Australia, Canada, America, New Zealand. Getting back to what Easton Thomas has said, and I won't keep you, I won't go on and rant. Once you throw so much mud at any particular group, it becomes irrelevant. The white young man, we're talking about the cost of living in New York. Someone mentioned that. Well, guess what? The second most expensive city. Forget about New York. That's cheap.
Sydney.
Second. First one is Hong Kong, followed by Sydney. It is crazy. I mean, a toilet in a park, 10 square meters will probably cost you 2 million Australian dollars, which is about 1.5 American dollars. It's. I mean, the chances of my children, and I've got 4 professional, except one, he's doing a trade. He's got to be the richest in terms of economics. But there's no way. There is no way they can save. And I think that's applicable. So you've got to ask yourself, how did this come about? 30, 40 years ago, you had a father, had a mortgage, 2 or 3 kids, married, and he worked, and he had his suburban little cottage. No longer applicable. And this is where the breeding of the left and the right. America is so divided, and we are becoming divided here in Australia. And I think the elites are frightened, are really frightened of the division. Because, the good old days, the peasants used to add pitchforks, and they used to go towards the castle seeking justice. And unfortunately, I've got no solutions. I've got no, magic wand. But I tend to agree with, again, what he says. The white man is he's got nothing to lose. You call him a Nazi. You call him an antiseptic or whatever. It's water off duck's back. Being categorized and being smeared, ridiculed by feminists. And the other thing which I really detest, silence of my holy Apostolic Catholic Church, is deafening. As you know, I'm a trad Catholic, pre-Vatican II, and silence, you consent. in law. And I'm not going to go into criticizing any particular person or priest or bishop or etc. Anybody can do that. But I'm, we stood, and you mentioned G.K. Chesterton, and this is what Chesterton, he was a convert to Catholicism, as you all know. But one of the phrases he said, we are for the underdog. We have to be on public square in the forefront. We talk, and you mentioned earlier, you know what French Revolution did? It took the Catholic Church out of political, cultural, public square. Cultural being radio, Hollywood, etc., and plays, and political being DC, Washington DC, I should say. And it's, I don't know. I'm just an observer. I hope I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong in many of my observations or views. But there's no, what's the solution? What do you do? And I think it's once you divide and rule, the good old Roman things, you get a fight. And that's, mind boggles. Anyway, I'll shut up while I'm ahead.
I think the truth is a lot more complicated, right? The people with a lot of money see different things in the world. So the UK is the best example of this. There was no way until quite recently, actually, that they, like Carl Benjamin tried, a bunch of people tried, a bunch of politicians tried, right? To get people to understand that the rape games were real, right? That they were that was even happening. So they have all these numbers, they have all the data, they have eyewitnesses, they have stories, they have court cases, and none of the elite could see it. They actually couldn't see it. It's not a matter of them manipulating anything, right? They just couldn't see it, and so they weren't paying attention. And it took a long time for their attention to move. But as Jonathan Bijou says, the world is attention. And people at that level don't pay attention to same things as you and I. Like a millionaire doesn't pay attention to how much a car costs because they can just buy one. They don't have to worry about it, right? Or these days, a tens of millionaire, because $1 million ain't nothing nowadays, but it used to be. And yeah, there's costs are going up, but those costs going up, and you see this particularly with AI, is a function of more and more people wanting more and more different types of technology. Instead of in the old days where we focused on a few things like food technology, shelter technology, and transportation technology. And now we have tons of other types of technology which are completely unnecessary, some of which I would argue we should keep, like maybe this live stream and its related things, right? And some of which we should get rid of, which is like, I can do this in an easy hit. All the YouTube channels that are AI driven, we should get rid of. Right? See, everybody can agree on that one, right? No one wants AI slop. See, so you can make these divisions. It's just that right now we have both. And if you look at the cost of AI, first of all, that's the mother of all bubbles. Like it's not as big as the 2000 housing crisis, but we're going to have another one of those anyway. The subprime market in the U.S. is not good for cars, and houses will be next. So that's happening. That bubble's going to break. Those two bubbles are probably going to break right around the same time, in fact, right? But that's because we want all of these specialized technologies, and that just requires a lot of actual slavery at some level. And we can export it to China only for so long until we get into a tariff war, for example, and then that breaks that. And so these are problems. I would be shorting NVIDIA. The problem with shorts is you have to buy them on contract, so you have to call when it's going to go down, and that's a lot harder to tell. Because see, so like NVIDIA is a great example. NVIDIA is making all of their money because they noticed one little thing. All of the people with the most money, in other words, the quote high margin customers, that's not me and it's not you. It's not anybody here. We're not high margin customers, guys. You can whine about the cost of a graphics card all day long. That is not a high margin business. Sorry.
5% margin, maybe 7.
No, they're probably making 35, 40, right?
Not the board partners.
But they're making 600% on Elon Musk. So
no. 100%.
the
math adds up. Yeah.
Right. 600%, things like that. That's what they're making on Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And as people have pointed out, in fact, I said this the other day, I don't remember to who, maybe on my Discord server, but I was pointing out right now, what we're going to be known for in 20, 25 years, this is going to be the age of money laundering because everyone's laundering money. I know, I can't remember the name of the guys. They're right in North Carolina too. They're about 3.5 hours from my house.
Gamers Nexus.
No, they did a whole expose on, well, if you just read the headlines from NVIDIA gave this amount of money to, I think it was AMD, and AMD gave similar amount of money to somebody else who then gave it back to NVIDIA, that sort of thing.
Steve Burke at Gamers Nexus, he did that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It was Gamers Nexus. Yeah, that was really interesting. So just based on the public record, they're laundering money. They're laundering money through these companies, and the money may not even have changed hands yet, but when it does, it's all going to be a wash just from what they've announced. Roughly, there might be $1 billion here, $1 billion there, concentrated somewhere else. These guys, like that, but that's happening everywhere. The banks are doing that, right? The government's been doing that. That was the whole shutting down of the silly USAID thing, right? And then all these YouTube channels mysteriously went out of business overnight. A little weird, right? So that's a pattern that you can see if you're looking at patterns and not trying to discern things from political or economic frames, which are garbage. I'm not going to tell you anything about the world, right? So how that plays out and when Elon Musk stops buying, I can't tell. He won't stop buying because, Anthropic loses money on Claude or something. He doesn't care, right? He won't stop buying because X can't make AI profitable because he's probably got a 7 or 10 year time frame on that still. So for him, he's going to keep investing until that time frame is up. And if he thinks everyone else is going to go out of business in the meantime, all the better. That's how these guys think, and that's how they do business. And if you read their books, they just tell you that's what they're doing. It's not that hard. Like they'll tell you in their if you read their little quarterly reports and say Jeff Bezos wasn't shy. Jeff Bezos has been saying for decades, oh, my plan is to put all the retailers out of business and steal that entire market share from them. That's his plan. And he's using the drug dealer model. You give it away for free early, you get people addicted, and then you jack up the prices. And that's what Amazon has been doing slowly. Great business model. He said he was going to do that. He's just doing what he said. That's all. He's a scumbag and, probably would be better off without him, but whatever. Different problem.
I wonder how much of our modern maladies are also caused just by the amount of money that's being thrown at certain assets.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So like housing is now no longer simply a place to live, but people consider it an investment on which they expect to. And maybe it was always like that. I don't know. I didn't live in the 17th century. Maybe housing has always been a bit like that. But there's so much
money laundering. The housing market right now is a primary form of money laundering, especially for overseas. Like the Boston housing market, when that got expensive. So when was that? So they opened up the buildings, and then that was probably 2015, 2012, in that range. The reason why Boston housing got expensive is because the actual population of the city went down. They don't tell you this. But if you were there, you could have noticed the population of the city went down and number of houses went up. It's because they were all investment. They're all Chinese and Brazilians and other people buying up investment buildings. And a lot of people point to it and go, see that empty tower? And like, there's some truth to that, but that's not the problem. The problem is wealthy people will buy real estate in multiple cities all over the place just to have a place they can go to when they want it. So it may be empty, but it's not like they will go there. They'll just only spend a month in Boston during the summer, which, by the way,
it was like the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles owns a beautiful lake cabin. I think it's on Leech Lake in Minnesota. And he's there like 3 or 4 days a year.
Yep.
It's this huge, beautiful property. And it's like,
it's empty
oh my
all the time.
gosh.
Anybody who owns a yacht, because nobody who owns a yacht actually spends any time on their yacht, right? It's a couple of weeks. a year at most they spend out on the yacht, right? It's the same thing, but that's how the wealthy live. That's how they do things. I don't do things that way. I don't have that mindset. I couldn't do that if I wanted. I'm the kind of guy who goes, how far do we have to drive and how long are we spending there? Because if that ratio's off, I won't go. Like I don't do that anymore, but I used to. I used to be like, I am not going to spend an hour somewhere. I have to drive an hour to and from. That's too long. I can't. I'm not spending 3 hours to do a 1 hour thing. That's not happening. I'll do one for one, an hour for an hour. Now I don't do that anymore, by the way. But I used to be like that, right? So all of that factors into this because you're looking at the world thinking everybody thinks the way you think and not realizing there's whole bunches of people that have lots of money. They don't think the way you think. They could care less if groceries go up by 20% because the grocery bill is 1/100th of their monthly spend. And it's hardly worth, even if it doubled, they wouldn't notice. It's just not interesting to them. And they're never going to pay attention to that in a meaningful way. They may go, oh, the poor people, right? But they'll just give more money to the food bank. They're not going to try to lower food prices, even when they can, because that happens all the time, actually. If you look carefully, like, bro, you're like in charge of some of this shit. You could just make it cheap, but they don't. No, they give to the food banks. Of course they do, because that's how they see the world. Right. And all the real estate price hikes are pretty much due to money laundering. People storing or at least storing their money in US real estate rather than, we'll say, explicit US dollars for all kinds of tax shelter reasons and whatnot. And that's just artificially inflating the price. And then because we're using averages to calculate everything in a huge country, which is a massive mistake, by the way, people don't realize, no. Housing is bifurcated heavily now. There's lots of cheap houses and lots of expensive houses. All the expensive houses are in the city, by the way, and all the cheap houses are not in the city. Just the way it is. And that gap is huge right now. It's huge. When I bought this place, so I got 12 acres of land and a ready to move in house with a shed under $100,000. And that was like 9 years ago, right? My mother's house, 3 miles from here, technically in the city, although she's just as far from the center of Columbia as I am, or at least she was when she was living there. That house was $280,000 and no land, right? It's just in the middle of a development and it's a very nice development, but still. Granted, it's a much larger house. It's 2,900 square feet, and I'm 900 square feet, but like, it's a lot more money and no land. And I got a pond and I've got a brook on the edge of my property. And I am just as close to all the cool things that we have in New England as she was, except it's a lot easier getting out of here than it was out of her little development, because her development had 1,100 houses in it or something insane. So you have to drive through a significant portion of it to get in and out of that place, right? So, that's a pretty big difference, right, in quality of living and stuff and expense. And that gap has gotten bigger, although unfortunately now where I am is kind of the place to live, and housing prices went from $150K for that kind of house that I just described, about 2,500 square feet, 2-car garage, half an acre to an acre of land. That was $150,000 down the street. 2 years ago, you could still get a house for $150,000 around here. Nope, 230. Same house, 230. Same amount of land, 230 all day long.
That's just demand driving up the price, right? People bidding up houses when they come.
We're the most moved to state. They're building like mad. Actually, the place where I live, they've expanded the boundaries of it, I guess. There's always a fight. Like, how big is the city of Columbia? I don't know. What week is it? They keep expanding Columbia and whatever. They've got, Columbia is so big, it has two, one unincorporated and one incorporated town inside the limits of Columbia. It's crazy down here. I love it, but it's nuts. They do weird things. They do strange things. So yeah, you have this effect, and then they use averages. And then you don't really know what housing prices are. They're actually not all that unaffordable until about 2 years ago.
Well, this was an interesting statistic that I heard, is that for a lot of countries, the percentage of people that live in their big urban center is much higher than in the United States. That we're much more spread out over across the entire country. from our urban centers than that. So, it's like I mean, I live a little bit more like an elite in certain aspects because I don't really feel the grocery prices moving. Somebody
Yep.
else pays for my groceries, and somebody else pays for my lovely, wood paneled study here, and all of that. So I don't feel these things, but like some people are just absolutely tearing their hair out because they can't afford housing, and then other people can manage it. And it's like, well, am I talking to somebody on the internet or am I talking to somebody in real life? Because that's usually the deciding factor. Because I know that people will complain about how expensive things are here in Fargo, but compared to the national average, it's
Way
rather
below.
tame and affordable there.
Yeah.
But when somebody just sits there and pretends like it's still, oh, you can work a factory job with a high school diploma and afford a starter house, a car, and a wife and children as if it were nothing. Like that's what gets people kind of ticked off, is when people are kind of disconnected from, no,
Yeah.
the rent is so expensive, I can't
Well,
live here.
but you can hear. And I know
Yeah.
that because people are doing, like, if you just, it's funny to me. I'm like, did you look at the numbers? What does the average family of four make in a state like South Carolina? It's a hell of a lot less than you can imagine. And if you match it up with the other numbers, because they're not measuring the same things the same way, they're using completely different methodologies and they're counting completely different people, right? And completely different sets of people. Those two numbers can't be correct. One of them has to be wrong. What's the one that says things are unaffordable that's wrong? What they're doing is they're rolling in the elites, they're rolling in all the high-end prices. And because wealthy people will pay more, a higher percentage of a premium to buy something than middle class people will. Of course, they have the money. If you have the money, you'll pay 30% over asking like that, or 50. I know people. I physically, personally know people that have paid 50% over asking because they wanted that place and they didn't want to be bothered. And they just happen to have millions of dollars. So they're like, we don't care. We don't care if we're, quote, overpaid. So this thing is overpaying. When you have a business that brings in a few $1,000,000 a year, you're not overpaying for anything. You're getting what you want when you want, the way you want it, because you can. Period.
It's sort of like maybe you could get a Snickers bar for 70 cents somewhere, but you're at a convenience store and they're charging $4 for it. It's like, well, heck, I want a Snickers bar right now, and
Right now.
$4 is,
You pay the $2 for right now.
yeah,
Right. And wealthy people can do that. But and this
at
happens.
a scale that we can't appreciate.
But this happens all the time. Wealthy people will pay $40 for a Snickers bar at a New York hotel. Why? Because it gets delivered to them. That's
Yeah.
why. And they do that now. That somebody somewhere is doing that right now. Now, you and I can't imagine under any circumstances paying $40 for a Snickers bar. I can get my car, go get a freaking Snickers bar for $1.50. Right? I ain't paying no $40. Right? In fact, I can get it DoorDashed here. It probably cost me like $8 max. I ain't paying no 40. Someone somewhere is paying 40 and they don't care. It doesn't matter to them. It makes no difference. And I know that I cannot imagine being in that situation. Like, maybe I can imagine that situation exists, but I've never lived that way ever in my life. And so I'm like, no, I can't really imagine. And I don't know what that does economically, because you can't. And economists can't calculate it. They call it what do they call it? The marginal buyer, right? The marginal buyers. Some economists are smart enough to pay attention to the marginal price, what the marginal buyer will pay. That's the guy who paid the most for the thing. That's all it is. So when the guy who normally pays the most for the thing, and there's a handful of them, basically, like an actual handful, by the way, because only one person can pay the most for the thing by definition, right? When they stop buying things, prices in the areas where they spend collapse in all cases.
That's why 50/90 prices haven't gone down, because people are still spending $3,000 on them. Okay.
Yep. There you go. That's how it works. The marginal buyer is a biggest single determiner of prices in any marketplace. Finding the marginal buyer might be really difficult. See, so this is why when people start talking economics and they don't say marginal buyer, I go, you know what we're talking about. We're done here. I'm not listening to anything you have to say because you don't know what you're talking about. Because that's the single biggest indicator right there. Everything else is actually quite irrelevant. It has ripple effects, we'll say at the level of you and I, maybe. We may care about it, but it doesn't affect a market. Like I don't affect the market, right? Like if I don't buy a computer this year, that doesn't change computer prices even one little bit, as much as I would like to think that it should, right? And weird things affect the market. Like if Gamers Nexus does something and says like all these Intel chips are bad, which they did by the way, that can actually have quite an effect on the Intel market in general, right? But it doesn't move it too much because their biggest customers still businesses, and if the
Or
businesses
OEMs, yeah.
don't care, the businesses don't, and businesses don't generally stress the chips enough to find the problem. So it's not that they didn't feel it, they did, but they didn't feel it the way the gamers felt it. Like they bought one gaming machine, it was really expensive, and it stopped working or it started glitching, right? The big companies buy, 10,000 machines for their data center, and they have a 10% failure rate instead of a 3% failure rate. And they go, we're angry. It's not the same impact though, really. So you can't equate the two because scale changes everything.
It seems like the recipe for social cohesion would be a capacity for your marginal buyer, your multimillionaire, to be able to actually see the needs a little bit farther down the line. The needs, right? Not even like the spoken needs, but the things that people actually need, and go and provide for them. So, even though the Medicis, right, were quite famous for murdering their political opponents and like every kind of, dirty scumbag trick you can imagine, the Medicis pulled it. Well, they understood what made for a good city, and so they also invested in a magnificent cathedral. I think it's still the third largest dome in the world after St. Peter's in Rome and St. Paul's in London, with a magnificent facade and all of this artwork, because they're like, well, this builds up our city, and this is good for the people there. So even though there'd be a lot of things I wouldn't, like I don't murder your political opponents, like your position, your status in the world is just not important enough to shed blood. It's just not. But yeah, that capacity to, and that's what good governance would actually look like.
Yeah.
Good governance would be like, oh, this is what needs to be done. It might not enrich my pockets the most, but hey, I'm already fabulously wealthy. So
government should spend money on things that individuals couldn't spend money to do. So justice should be a loss leader in the government, if you want to think of it in economic terms, which I don't actually recommend, but people seem unable to get out of that stupid frame because they're dumb, right? So yeah, it should be a loss leader, because if I go to court, I should expect to get justice, right? And that's
or a good enough approximation. A good enough approximation.
Right.
Kirk, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. Well, this actually goes to a point that I was talking with Jacob the other day about economics, and we were talking about this idea that non-excludable, non-rivalrous, and/or anti-rivalrous goods and services are increasing in the economy with the rise of online technology. And I wonder if this notion that Mark's bringing up of things that individuals can't pay for is related to this idea of like anti-rivalrous. Yeah. And
well, they're not anti-rivalrous. See, in economics, specifically in economics, nothing is anti-rivalrous because everything is competing for your money. Right. So that concept and economics are at odds with one another. This is why I don't like it when people talk economics, because usually they just do not understand enough about the basics of how the mechanics actually work to get it right. And to be fair, as Nassim Taleb says, although a little bit hyperbolically, he's kind of backed off. All economists are frauds. And actually, he likes Dubner. So read the Freakonomics books, which I recommend anyway, alongside Taleb. Like there is a way to do good economics. And like I said, marginal buyer, there's no such thing as anti-rivalrous goods and services, because your goods and services will say, even for your free capital, if I hate economics. I hate this. This is the way they talk about it, though. So even for your free capital, because your free capital is limited, all of the things that could be taken up by your free capital, like, I don't know, your X subscription, or your, cell phone AI subscription, or your subscription to your extra high speed internet, which I can't buy, by the way, which pisses me off. That is still competing for dollars. It's all compete. There's no non-competition in economics. That's why I don't like the economics frame, and I don't like the binary politics frame, because there's no non-competition. And that the world we live in, there is a non-competitive stance to everything. It's called looking up. So to Father Eric's point, what should the wealthy, the elites, and the people in governance, to some extent, also to a different extent, be paying attention to? They should be paying attention to things that last through generations to help them to look up, because they can see that, and you and I can't see it as well. Whatever else you want to, I would argue at all, but that's a different problem, right? At least not like, what is the utility of having a very expensive ornate building, right? Oh, well, the utility is that if you build it right and it lasts for generations and it's beautiful, it makes for a better culture, period. End of statement. It doesn't make you necessarily a better person, although on average, for values of you that encounter the building, it should, right? But that's not 100%, right? This is where people they do this general for specific confusion. They go, well, some people think that building's ugly. And I'm like, all right, you're not good enough to make an argument about something. You should probably not ever try to argue any point, right? That's ridiculous, because you're doing this general for specific confusion. You're saying, well, some specific set of people won't get out of the building what 99% of people will. Who cares, right? There's always going to be a margin. Let's not pay attention to the margin. Let's pay attention to the right thing for the most number of people. And we've lost sight of that because we keep going individualism, exception, doesn't work for me.
The exception is the exact same thing as the norm because of equality.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, look, guys, I am the exception here, right?
Yes, Father.
Like, I don't want everybody to be a priest. I think that would be a disaster. You've got to have a certain capacity for, you could say abstraction, you could say spiritual. They're kind of the same way of mapping the same thing.
There'd be no babies outside of the Byzantine church.
There'd be no babies outside the Byzantine church. How sad would that be? The babies
and the Anglican ordinariate.
We can't let that happen.
That's like, there's such a tiny percentage of the Catholic Church. It would be a disaster. It would be an absolute disaster,
Yeah, you don't want the only lay babies to be like British blokes.
Yeah.
Oh, my father is a convert for Protestantism. That was what he was able to marry my mother.
Yeah. So it's it's just got to be able to handle these exceptions, man. Like, how much of our modern problems is just not being able to sit with like this person doesn't follow the usual rule,
Oh, well.
Just drives me nuts. But that capacity, it's really nice when things are actually working properly. And I'll give you an example. Hopefully this isn't too much, but there's an apostolate that I'm involved in as a chaplain. It's basically just a group of families that have a group of couples that have a structured way of meeting regularly to pray and study together and have fellowship, right? So we once a month, we have a meal together, we spend some time in prayer together, and there's a text for study that we share about, right? Just this past, I've been doing this for a few years, and a lot of times I spend a lot of time listening to this group, because I'm playing the long game here. I don't want to like jump in and run things immediately. But just this past month, there was the one guy. He's a good guy. There's really not much I'm going to say bad about him, but there's a few points that we could grow in, right? And he was just talking. I kind of interrupted him and like just gave a little insight about prayer, because he was kind of looking at the wrong things. We'll say he was looking at the wrong things, and just a lot of people in the group were like really grateful for that intervention, which I thought was really basic. But it's only really basic because I'm a priest and I'm like, I have the capacity to pay attention to these things that they don't. And so, and so Mark was pointing at that people at different levels of the hierarchy can see things differently. Right. And so, somebody who was looking at this, these meetings from a purely economic frame would say, well, this guy just shows up and eats. He never brings any food himself, and he hardly ever talks. Like, what exactly does he contribute to the group here? And I've been pretty quiet in these groups. And like, this was the first time I like really, in 3 years kind of came at him. And I think it's going to have an effect.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a value, it's the old trope. Well, in computers, there's this whole thing about the mainframe's broken, and they call this guy, and he comes in, opens his little case with a hammer, and it taps the thing, and it works, and he sends them this outrageous bill for some, seemingly ridiculous amount of money, and they come back and they say, we're not paying that much. You need to break your bill down, and he's like, $10 to for travel, and $20 for the use of the hammer, and then the rest of the outrageous money is for him knowing where to use the hammer, right? It's like, yes, right. And so you only need that guy. Like, he's a consultant, you only need him once in a while, right? But when you need him, he's that value is an outsized value, and that's what the elites are supposed to be able to do. I remember the guy who competed on The Apprentice in the first year. So the part of The Apprentice, if you won, you get to be Donald Trump's right-hand man. That was the prize, at least in the early apprentices. And for some reason, some way, which makes no sense to me because I don't normally listen to garbage like that, although it didn't happen to be garbage this time, they did an interview with him, and he said, no, you guys don't understand. Donald Trump is brilliant. He said, I worked on this project in Chicago for this building for him. And we had, like, it was like a half a year thing, right? We had this all done. And then Donald Trump flies in, looks at the plant, and in 10 minutes goes, this isn't going to work. This is too ornate. The seagulls are going to come in and poop all over this. And then you're going to have to clean it. Like, you can't do this. And then he like left the meeting. So he's like there for like maybe 20 minutes and just like finds an obvious problem and take it, because he's like, it's your thing, you deal with this. I pointed out the problem, I got better things to do. That's the correct thing. You want somebody like that to do that, right? And so that is the proper, we'll say, role for the elite. And it's actually the role that Plato outlines in the Republic, by the way. So everybody should know this by now. I don't know why they don't know this by now, but apparently they don't.
Yeah, well, we're all just trying to figure things out. And we're all kind of dumb. We don't necessarily know what we're doing. Yep. And sometimes we have to make decisions based on very limited information for the good of the whole group. And we might not know everything perfectly. And I'm saying that specifically to the person that I don't know, that I just kicked out of the studio because I've just been porn bombed too many times. But if you really want on, you can go ahead and try again next week. A little cagey about showing his face on the internet. And all three of my friends here have proven themselves to not porn bomb here. But they did so by showing their faces first. So that's how we get here.
True. For a long time, too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have we solved anything?
I think so. I think we've reframed things so that people can calm down a bit, understand what's going on, and not put things in political and economic frames which don't work and haven't been working for years.
I'll trust Mark over any professional economist, unless, well, I will say I'm actually more of a fan of the Austrian economist than Mark is, but that's another conversation for another day.
Read Freakonomics, Kirk. It'll do more for your understanding of, we'll say, real economics than anything else, probably. Great series of books, the Freakonomics guys. Dubner's great. Love that stuff. Taleb read him and was like let up a bit on economists, which I found awesome.
Is he humble enough to know that he can't predict things?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the theme of Freakonomics is how weird human behavior is in an economical frame and why it's counterintuitive. So, like, for example, putting a price on picking up your kid late at the daycare actually increases the number of people that picks up their kid late at daycare because of how permissive works. That's the first story in the Freakonomics book. It's well worth a read, believe me. And there's tons of other things in there. They did neat things like, I think it was Dubner even, like they were like with drug dealers in Chicago. And so they talk about the economics of why people get involved in the drug industry and how much money they make and why it's a trivial amount and what they're really doing and all that. Like it's excellent. It's so informative about how the world works. Plus they wrote How to Rob a Bank and When to Rob a Bank. Something like that. There's another couple.
The main thing is that like human beings aren't strictly logical and rational in their decision making, right? There'll be like some intuitive leaps, and then also just some like really bad habits
bad habits and what they look at. So like with drugs, they make it, they make like $10 an hour. They were making $10 an hour, right, in the drug trade, which they could have beat at Walmart at that time pretty easily. But they're not in it for the money today. They're in it because somebody's got to be the top guy. So it works more like the lottery than it does like a rational economic calculation, because that's how human beings are, right? And that's why you read Taleb, because Taleb's pretty clear about this. No, we make decisions based on risk, period. End of statement. We don't use other factors to make decisions. That's actually false. And once you realize that, like, human behavior becomes very manageable. You're like, oh, I see why this person's doing this. It makes total sense now.
Yeah.
Like a risk with the possibility of reward, not just like, oh, we like risking things.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I have to add to that is that I don't disagree with any of that. The only thing is that I've heard, maybe I'd have to read more about them, but I've heard that basically that's exactly what the Austrian economists and von Mises and Hayek said, that you can't calculate human behavior because of it's inherently indeterminate and spontaneous. So if that's the case, I'm not necessarily saying Taleb and Dubner are wrong. I'm just saying what they're saying is just a restatement of what these earlier guys said.
No, that's fine. I mean, if you actually follow Hayek and Mises, then you're not putting human behavior in the economic frame at all, ever. Like, you're never saying the reason why the economics went up is because of this human behavior, because that wouldn't be true, right? And you're also not trying to predict human behavior by saying, well, houses cost more money and therefore people are you would never do that, right? The Austrians would never do that. They would stick economics to economics, and economics only works at a certain scale, and that scale isn't the individual, and it isn't small groups of people, and it is even large groups of people, right? Economics only works at the scale of roughly multiple, quote, countries. In the United States, it's different because our states are roughly countries everywhere else. They're roughly the size of European countries. And so you have, like, that's the scale at which you can understand things in economics. If you try to understand anything outside that scale, economics is the wrong frame. It won't work. And I don't think Mises would make that mistake. But everybody else uses their tools at the wrong scale. And that's politics is the same way. Politics is just voting. That's all it is. And if you don't understand that, you're going to misuse it to say, well, this is why this happened, because these people. No, that's not. And politics is the end of a bunch of things that have already happened, right? Like, it's the the way you vote is a reflection of how you've already made up your mind about things. It has nothing to do with changing the future. It has everything to do with reflecting the past. Politics is downstream of culture, right? For sure.
Yeah, and culture is downstream from theology. So moral of the
Insofar
story.
as it is lived out, yes.
So moral of the story: read your St. Thomas Aquinas, folks.
Downstream of religion, I would say, not
More of the
necessarily
story is go to mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, don't skip leg day. Because not everybody has the capacity to sit down and read Thomas Aquinas, but anybody can run that program.
Yeah.
And you may say, Father, I don't want to lift weights. I suppose I can tolerate that. Don't skip leg day is a way of saying do things that are difficult but good for you. And I put that in a weightlifting frame because people understand when you put, 375 pounds on your back, that's going to be difficult, but ultimately good for you because it'll make you stronger. So theology, the theology that's contained in our bottom ticker is enough for everybody. And for friends who like the books and have the capacity to deal with the abstractions present in the books, they definitely read the Thomas Aquinas. But I hate to say it, it is optional.
Yeah.
The books are optional.
And you know what's not optional? Sleep for rational animals.
Sleep for rational animals. By golly, Kirk, you're a genius. You must
Well
know
done,
that
Kirk.
it's dark here in North Dakota. It has been for hours now, actually, because it's that time of year. And if I were to behave rationally, I would go to bed, and I think I might do so now that the opportunity's been opened up for me. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining. Good night, and God bless
Good
you all.
night.
Good night. God bless. Bye.